Is Newcastle United still a people's club?
Of course, we are a people's club. We are a one club city, a city close to 1 million people, and a club which is right at that center of the city. Everybody in the city grows up supporting Newcastle. Everybody historically, being a shipbuilder city, ended up growing to work in the docks, get their money back, and invest it in the club at the weekend. That was their outlet for generations together. For decades, that was the only way that they had entertainment. Um, and Newcastle used to define everybody's emotions around the city. You can't go to the city of Newcastle and meet somebody who is not aware of football. Every single person in the city is invested in Newcastle's success. And they might not be football fans, they might not be people who are going to the club every week to see a game, but everybody in the city is aware of how Newcastle is doing, of how Newcastle is competing at the level, and everybody is invested in their success. It's a city that's built around the club,
I
and
agree. Okay.
everybody loves it.
All right, fine. Newcastle was a people's club, but now with the investment, can you still call that? Because Newcastle had this aura of, we are the small club, we are the big, typical small club, we are fighting with the big guns, we are fighting with the people at the top. Now that's gonna change. Obviously, they have invested. Don't I mean maybe not
But
flooded.
again,
Let's just say they have not flooded in money, but they have invested in players and they have had the money to do that. All right, they have invested in a good coach. They have a large stadium already. It's not a club with a 15,000 stadium. All right, the Newcastle stadium is pretty huge. They have supporters to fill that stadium. Okay, the global reach may not be as big as the other clubs, but they will get there. They have the money backing. So what makes you think that Newcastle is still a people's club? Liverpool has always
okay,
said that they were a
I'll
people's
give you the
club.
answer for that.
Yeah, tell me.
All right. So when you say Newcastle have now come into money, how can it be a people's club now? Newcastle, prior to Michael actually owning us, were always a big club. We were in the Champions League. We used to play at this level for years on together. In 1995, when we signed Shearer, we broke the transfer record globally. The global transfer record was broken to sign Shearer. So money has not been a problem for Newcastle, and at that time, more than anything, Newcastle was still a people's club. Even throughout the Champions League phases, when we were beating Barcelona, when we were beating Juventus, we were still a club at the top of our game, and we were still having a people's club identity. It's just that since Mike Ashley took over in 2007, our revenue has decreased, whereas every single other club's revenue has shot up tenfold. He pretty much took us from a club that was competing regularly in Europe and took us down to a shell of a club which suffered two relegations in the time that he was a manager. Now the problem is everybody now considers Newcastle to be what Mike Ashley's version of Newcastle was. That's not Newcastle. That it has not been Newcastle for the 15 years that Mike Ashley owned us, which is corresponds to when social media grew and when people started watching football and when television rights grew. That was the corresponding time when Mike Ashley owned us, and so people's impression is, oh, that is the real Newcastle. That's not. Newcastle had a period of success and sustained period of success prior to that. And it's not new money. We are not the new kid on the block. We are just claiming what was rightfully ours.
Agreed. So the thing, what I want to ask is, Newcastle was probably like Liverpool, and if Mike Ashley wasn't there, you would be where Liverpool is right now, supported by people because you think it's supported by the people. I mean, Liverpool fans always think that, yeah, this is the people's club. This is the small man fighting with the big, although they have actually gone in and bought a lot of players, but they've managed to keep that identity. Newcastle now is trying to fight for that same identity with Liverpool. I see that happening. I see that with the increased, intensity of games between Newcastle and Liverpool. Klopp getting under Eddie Howe's skin and Eddie Howe actually being flustered. I think at least that's what happened. So, are you trying to say that Newcastle was a big club and was seen as a small club by people, and that probably got under your skin during those 10 years, 10, 15 years of Mike Ashley? So, you mean to say that you agree that Newcastle is essentially a big club that had a bad time?
Yeah, 100%. I think we were a big club always, and that's what the general consensus was always. But we dropped out. We clearly dropped out of that elite um, team sort of group. And if we weren't there, we hadn't dropped out. I don't think a team like Spurs would have come into that group. It was because we dropped out majorly. Our revenues dropped. We were the only club in that time period who had dropping revenues when everybody else's grew by more than 100%. So Mike Ashley, drove us into the ground in a commercial sense, and that obviously reflected on the pitch. And we clearly dropped out from that elite. But what we needed was Mike Ashley to go and somebody else to come in and get us back to where we were before. I'm not saying that the current owners are anything great, or they are the owners that I wanted, but they are owners who are clearly invested in the growth of the club. They are owners who clearly are willing to invest. They are owners who want us to improve, and these are things that we have never had for close to 2 decades now. And it's important that those metrics come into the city because, as I said, the city is a working man's city or a working woman's city. It is a city that is invested around Newcastle. That's a city that wants Newcastle to grow, and any growth in Newcastle will reflect positively in the city's growth as well. Um, so I think it was important for this to happen, and I'm very pleased that we are back to where we are with this dispute against Liverpool that you talked about. Potentially that might be true. I don't think Liverpool are very happy with us being taken over by somebody they seem perceived to be evil. But I don't think, first of all, the fans don't have a say in who takes over their club. It's all done at boardroom level. And second of all, they're bringing us success, and I don't. When success happens, I don't think people receive that very well outside of your group. People are always kind of threatened by success, and they always look for ways to pull you down when you become successful. And that's clearly happening with Newcastle. All the new rule changes that, as you said, Klopp was laughing about are clearly intended to target Newcastle. And there's no doubt about that. But there's this huge thing saying Newcastle's owners, or once Newcastle were taken over, owners cannot have sponsorships from companies they have relations with or companies they own, which, okay, fine. Let's forget about everybody else's, like Leicester, who are owned by King Power and stuff like that. But let's just focus on Newcastle. Sports Direct, when Mike Ashley was our owner, Sports Direct used to be plastered all across the stadium. Sports Direct was sponsoring us. You couldn't watch Newcastle match without having Sports Direct shown into your eyes. It was that brutal. They were including the coaches' seats were all covered in Sports Direct signs. And do you know how much Newcastle got for that? Not a single penny. Mike Ashley took that as free advertising for his brand. And everybody was happy with that. Nobody asked questions. No journalist wrote about it. Nobody wanted to even know what was happening because we were irrelevant. Nobody cared about Newcastle. We were just doing our own bit at the bottom of the table and getting by. And as long as you remain irrelevant, nobody asks questions. But when you start becoming successful, people are threatened by that success and want to, smash you down. And that's what's happening now.
What I'm really interested to see is now Newcastle fans, including yourself. You've always been this underdog, sort of underdog, fighting about the big ones. You've always complained about the big club bias, which may be present in every sports league in the world. Let me say, every league, every place you see. It's not just in the English Premier League, all right. Can be in the American League as well, in the NBA, in the NFL, all of that. You keep complaining about that. You keep complaining about all the perceived issues before the takeover from Saudi Arabia. All right, after the takeover of Saudi Arabia, or takeover of PIF is how I would like to say it. Yes, there were things that were targeted against PIF which were not done, which had obviously basis coming off from a place where an outsider coming in, maybe people were bugged with it. They were trying to do things to make sure that it was a bit more over the top, I will agree. But apart from that, now that you're going to go into the big league, now that you're going to become a big club, there's no doubt about that, all right? With the investment and the structure in place and Eddie Howe doing decently well, you are going to be in the there and thereabouts of the top level of the Premier League for a few years. There's no, as long as you don't completely mess up or bottle up, it should be fine. Are you still going to remember all the things? Are you still gonna like have the whole issue with the big club bias? Because you're gonna be a big club now. There are gonna be some decisions that whenever they go against your way, people will say that, oh, this was a big club, like, because things get more highlighted. You need to realize this. If there's a match between Sheffield United and Southampton, okay, maybe Sheffield United and Luton Town, and there was a controversial red card, it will come once in the paper and goes off. But if the same match was between Manchester United and any other club, if there was a controversial red card, a controversial penalty not given, it comes all over. It keeps being repeated. All right, people go and for some reason it comes more in the limelight. Newcastle is going to have that now. You are not having it, although like you said, you had the big club. You were a big club. You were in for some time. Now you're going to be raised to higher standards. So you have to expect that people are going to criticize you more. All right, we have been facing it.
I get it.
Yeah.
I completely get it.
So this is the first time
big
you are
club
having this
mentality.
criticism because everybody's going to criticize you. Manchester United is hated by everybody.
Yeah,
All
but
right,
that's
everybody.
it's quite hypocritical, to be honest, to criticize somebody for my point. What the sponsorship was, it's hypocritical to criticize us now for the same
Agreed.
thing
Agreed.
when we are successful, when the same thing was being done and we were being taken advantage of and nobody had any problems.
True,
When the
but
club
this is
was being run
also
into the ground,
this is not just with
nobody has any
you.
problems.
Everybody has a problem when a club is big. You keep questioning things that happen. Not in this,
But
not maybe
that's
not in
what
the financial point of view,
what I'm
but
saying is it's not right, because
every
what
decision
eventually
is
happens is if all these things keep on happening, eventually what happens is clubs go into administration. They cease to exist. And at that point, everybody goes like, "Oh, so sad. This club has gone to administration. They were poorly run. The owner was horrible. Blah blah blah." But what are you actually doing to prevent them from going into administration or this sort of
no,
circumstance in the first place? Nobody cares about any of that. The
no. What
only
I'm trying
thing
to
people care about is when you're threatening, when you're being successful, then they look at, oh, how can they be successful? We have an established top six. How can they come into that? We
But
need to,
every team,
bring them down
before
a peg.
coming into the top six, had to fight this, and those in the top six are always being tried to be pulled down. All right,
And I
it's
don't
it's
think
not
anybody
it's
in the
not
top
like
six is being pulled down.
it's
But I
it's
agree
not
with you that
like
every team coming into the top six needs to fight this. Leicester
yeah,
fought this unsuccessfully.
exactly. It's not like a top six that was set in stone. Like you said, Tottenham joined in later, so they were lucky. The timing was right, and they had a decent squad during that time. So they were in London. Agreed. So that was a more bigger commercial market. But for Newcastle to get in, they do have the support, like you mentioned. They can fill the stadium with just the people from Newcastle, more or less. So there is no reason why it should not work out as long as they manage to grow a support base and all of that, which should work out, which should eventually happen. What I'm trying to say is that you should realize that you are going to be criticized more often now. There's no doubt about
I
it, and not just
completely get
because
it.
you have been bought by who you have been bought, but because you're fighting for the top four.
No, I
You are
completely
going to be
get it. With
criticized.
success comes more discussion. All I wanted to say is, and more scrutiny and more, going into how we are doing and things like that. All I wanted to say is it shouldn't end up being hypocritical and targeted. That's all. You welcome scrutiny, welcome people talking about our game. Even last week at Liverpool, even from our own fans, I can tell you, people have just lost it at how we lost against Liverpool. It was a bad result. I completely agree. And Eddie Howe got a few things wrong, but people have gone into the nature of, oh, how should be sacked, and we should think about somebody else, and this is unacceptable. Blah 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 blah. Things happen at the elite levels of game. You can't overanalyze these things, I feel, and you have to, just go through bite your way through the scrutiny, just make your way through it, hold tight, and get over it, because the next game will come and hopefully we will do better. Obviously, it becomes a pattern, then it's a problem. But at this level, I agree the scrutiny is more, the chance of failure is quite high, and people will target us. I don't have a problem with that. My problem with the big club bias has always been that big clubs from referees essentially get a lot more decisions than other clubs do, and that's been acknowledged by Howard Webb, who's the head of the PFA. And I don't think it's an intentional bias. Hopefully not, because then that will be dragging the game into disrepute. But it's an unconscious bias, which people tend to place on their decisions. They go like, oh, if I make these decisions against Manchester United, the level of outrage that I will have will be more than a decision that I do against Crystal Palace or somebody else. So just because of that thinking in the back of the head, people make these unconscious decisions towards big clubs, and that's just not right. And I just don't want that to continue existing. And I think the refereeing bodies acknowledge that, and they're working towards it. I just don't see any sign of that happening at this point of time, but hopefully things will improve.
So NBA, for that matter, had tried to sort this out by coming up with all the big mistakes that happened within the last 2 minutes of the game. That's the way the game of basketball is played. So they can scrutinize every decision and talk about it later. They just put out a word or something of that sort. Anyway, that's far apart. What I'm trying to say is that
What do you
Newcastle.
think about the referees
No,
now trying
it's not
to
about the.
just
It's more important.
smash anybody who's trying to compete with them? Like, give them yellow cards, red cards.
Let me just first get back to what I was trying to make my point
Okay,
on.
fine.
Newcastle will be put in. You should be ready for the criticism because it's going to come in. All right, it's going to be coming. There's no doubt about that. And about the fans
Understandable.
wanting Eddie Howe out just because of one bad game, this has been faced by every elite manager. All right, even Sir Alex Ferguson faced it when he didn't win the league for 2 or 3 seasons. So
No,
everybody in,
that's what.
in
So
Manchester United wanted Sir Alex Ferguson out, and he came back. He won another Champions
So
League much later.
I
So what I'm
agree.
trying to
So
say is that
do you think that was justified criticism?
no, but it is going to
No,
be
that's
there.
all I'm saying. I'm saying
It's
I'm
not
not saying it shouldn't
justified.
exist, because there will always be people
When you
who make
have a
that sort
bigger
of
club
noise.
and when you're gonna be expected to win all the time, when you're fighting for the elite level, you are going to face that criticism from everybody. You can't control all your fans. You're gonna have all sorts of fans expecting all sorts of things, spewing all sorts of hate in social
I
media.
agree
You
with
cannot
you on that.
control all
Agree.
of them. So what I'm trying to say is that you have to be ready for all of this, because this is no longer a close-knit community which is always fighting against the power. All
No,
right, it's all going to
even
change.
even otherwise, I
Wait
agree
for
with you
a
that
couple of years.
you can't control the fans.
You
They
can't.
all have different vendettas. They all have
Exactly.
different agendas. They all have different outlooks. So
Exactly.
it's fine for everybody to make up their mind. But you're right. It comes with more criticism and more scrutiny, which people need to get used to. I completely understand that.
With great power
Uh,
comes great criticism. Comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that match then, Munish. Newcastle United versus Liverpool.
They bottled it.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair assessment. I agree we bottled it. We probably went into autopilot in that last 20 minutes and sort of believed our own hype, thinking, oh, we've not lost a match after taking a lead in the last 18 times at St. James's Park. They are down to 10 men. This will be just a stroll in the park. Eddie Howe took off our 3 best players, and we sort of thought we'll just do it quite easily. And Liverpool are an elite team. They sort of smelled it, and they put on all their best attackers, and they
So,
got the win. We bottled it. You're right. Yeah.
No, I remember last week I just told you probably Liverpool would smash 5-1 or something, and you said they have never lost by 2. And I always told you there's always a first time. You got to agree. And yeah, this is maybe the first time they have lost after leading for some time, whatever period of time, like you mentioned. Newcastle should have scored a goal more. Okay, agreed.
Easily,
Trent
we should have
Alexander
killed it off long
Arnold
back.
should have been sent off, but I think keeping him on the pitch was more of a liability for Liverpool. You should have
Possibly.
scored
He
more.
gave us the goal anyway. After
He
that,
gave
what
you
do you
the
think
goal,
about Van
he-
Dijk's red card?
That was a red card straight off. I mean, Van Dijk should have been red carded after the red card for his insolence, honestly. I think Jurgen Klopp knew that and actually pushed him away because he was going ballistic for no reason. Maybe he didn't realize
He has
it,
been
but
charged by the FA today.
all right. He
For
ran through a player. He ran through a player and he was through on goal. He should have been red carded. There was no doubt about it. I don't know. Maybe he just thought taking the ball was enough, but even in the first instance, I remember the commentary mentioning, "Oh, is it really a foul? He took the ball and all of that," and then they said, "Oh, maybe it is really a foul." It was a red card. It looked like a red card right at the beginning, and it was a clear red. Trent
Yeah.
Alexander-Arnold should have been given the second yellow, but they didn't give it because of the first incident where his insolence was yellow carded. Was that a big club bias? You tell me. I do not know. We just had a discussion on that.
Yeah, I think
More, but I
it
think
was
having
probably
Trent.
to do with it being very early in the match because I think he got that first yellow in the third minute, and that second, mistake, which surely deserved a yellow, was in the sixth minute. So perhaps the
So
referee was thinking this is too early to send somebody off, which is not
send
should how you
somebody
should be
off in a
thinking.
Liverpool Newcastle match. If this was
Yeah,
between some other clubs, this would have been sent off, isn't it?
yeah. Even Trent said at the end of the game that he was amazed that he could stay on the pitch after that.
Yeah, I think he probably Liverpool would have done better if he wasn't. I'm not really sure. So yeah, he had a bad game as we mentioned
Yeah,
last time.
his defending
Uh,
is just atrocious at this level.
yeah,
You said last time that most other managers wouldn't have put up with Trent, and
yeah, and
I think every weekend is proving that more and more.
no,
He would have been out
he's
of a Guardiola system long.
no, Guardiola. Like I mentioned, I'm not very. So he doesn't like big personalities and all of that. Trent is still a good player to have in your squad. There's no doubt. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. You would have him as a sub because try to create something chasing the game. But playing him week in and week out, Jurgen Klopp. But one thing is that he still trusts his players. Maybe trusts them too much, but he trusts him.
Also,
Uh,
Trent is a major fan favorite. He is the Liverpool born and bred sort of guy who's playing in the first 11. And I think that also places a sort of pressure on managers to select him, which again, there's no because he's a clearly talented footballer. There's no doubting that, but he's the liability defensively. He's just too much of a liability. I
yeah, and
thought Jurgen Klopp was
Liverpool.
going to move him into midfield like how he did last season, but that doesn't seem to be happening from this
Yeah,
year.
not really sure what exactly the plan is. Liverpool tried to change their whole style of play, depending on Trent. Maybe Jurgen Klopp finally got tired of that. Moving on to Newcastle's performance, they should have scored another goal. Honestly, at this level, they should have tried harder and scored another goal. They had a few good shots in, they had a few good chances, but they were still playing at the same intensity. They should have raised the intensity a bit more, I think, looking for the second goal immediately after the sending off. More apart
Yeah.
from that, what I would like to add is Liverpool. Darwin Núñez did well. There were a couple of mistakes, individual mistakes that led to goals from Newcastle's point of view.
Yeah.
Both the goals, I
Yeah.
think, were clear individual mistakes. Guimares, wasn't it, who gave off the ball for the
Yeah,
second goal?
second was
And,
Guimaraes, first
and
was Portman, who are
yeah,
both are sort of best players in the pitch who made
ex-
mistakes. It
exactly.
shows that we dropped our intensity here, right? It just these are not the players who make mistakes
And
week in
and
week out, and they just
and
dropped their intensity.
one more thing, I noticed Newcastle doesn't really have a leader on the pitch. I think I'm not really sure. From what at least I saw this game, I couldn't find anybody trying to make sure that the intensity was kept up. And Eddie Howe should have known that Jurgen Klopp is going to go in all guns blazing at the end. Okay, Liverpool is never going to keep quiet and just say, okay, fine, let's think about the goal difference. They are not a team trying to fight relegation on goal difference. They are a team trying to win the league. So they were going to go all out for it. And that's what he did. He put in Darwin Núñez. He just put in a bit more impetus in the attack, and that really worked. Two well taken
Yeah, you're
goals.
right. I think Eddie Howe did make a big mistake with that substitution, and I think he probably knows it himself. And he would be critical of that. But again, I don't want to read too much into it because he's literally not put a foot wrong in 18 months or so, and he's dragged us from nowhere into this elite level. So people make mistakes. It shouldn't be a pattern, but he clearly did make a mistake. There's no doubting that at all. And we dropped our levels, which is very, very unlike what Eddie Howe's teams are usually. We didn't also capitalize on our chances. Allison made some great saves. Harvey Barnes went out through on goal like the minute before Darwin Núñez hit that first goal. If he had just squared it to Wilson, we could have won 2-0. Again, small margins, but we should have played with more intensity and killed the game off long back. But yeah, what to do? I hope next weekend will be better. It's
Let's
against
see.
Brighton.
Brighton coming
So
off a loss in which they completely dominated the game against West Ham.
yeah,
People call it Moyes ball, probably should have called it Mourinho ball, but whatever it was, three well taken goals by West Ham. They really did
yeah,
well.
it was.
Brighton did the whole
They played on the
press.
counter really well.
They
It
did.
was quite surprising how effective West Ham were on the counter.
Bowen was good. Antonio was good. They had a really good. They were set up well, and 3 points well deserved to them. They beat the league leaders, so Brighton is no longer top of the league. Uh, what about Arsenal? What do you think about their game against Fulham?
Uh, Again, they bottled it. They bottled it against 10 men. Um, Calvin Bassey was sent off for a stupid red card. First yellow was for for time wasting. Second yellow was for dragging a player down while through on goal. The second yellow was deserved, but the first one, either way,
Question.
I think,
Uh,
yeah,
so if Trent was sent off at the same time, if it was him, because he's a bigger player, would he have been on? Because he was already on, in spite of two similar issues. But this was
yeah,
earlier in the game, so you said, all right,
yeah. It was very similar to the Trent one. The first one was for a stupid,
time waste,
nonsensical
I
mistake,
believe, right?
time wasting, throwing ball away. Second one was for obstruction of a player who was through beside him, which was very similar to what Trent did. But yeah, Trent didn't get a red. Calvin Bassey did. It was much later in the game, so probably that helped.
So is it the
Um,
big player or big club bias?
no, I
Anyway,
think it was definitely the timing was far more in favor of Trent. If he did the same sort of mistake at the 60th minute mark, I think he would have been sent off.
so how do the referees
Um,
sort this out?
I don't know. I don't
Exactly.
think
There's a lot of
uh,
questions
what I-
about it.
because it's clear the answer is more training and more understanding about the game and not to make decisions based on subjective evidence. But it's easier said than done. And these referees that Howard Webb have trained, honestly, I think the quality of refereeing in England is quite poor compared to most of the leagues in Europe. Um, and that shows as well in the Champions League. There are not many referees coming from England who are refereeing at the Champions League level. There are a few, but predominantly not. Um, and to improve this level, it needs to start from a grassroots level, and I don't think we'll see that change for a good few years. I don't know whether you saw Mike Dean saying that he doesn't send during one of his matches where he was VAR. Mike Dean is now retired; he can say what he wants. He said he did not send one of his mates to the VAR screen because he felt he had had a difficult time already that evening, and he didn't want him to go there and make another decision. This was 2 days back, and it's made front
See,
page news everywhere because
maybe,
clearly referees
probably
are
he's writing a book, okay? Just being honest with you.
possibly. Well, I have no idea why Mike Dean has just come out this and said,
Yeah,
throw
so
in
it's
the
obvious.
rest of his people under the bus.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
the PGMOL has issued a statement saying that is not a true reflection of how referees work, blah blah blah. But
No,
clearly, what he
this,
says is pretty much bringing the game to disrepute. And yeah, as you're
that's
right. Mike Dean must have something in it for himself, and he clearly must have something along the way.
okay. So
But
Fulham,
either way, so
Arsenal, yeah.
Arsenal ended up messing up against 10 men. They ended up conceding two soft goals. Uh,
The thing about Arsenal fans keep saying that they scored more goals than the XG last year. But the thing is, games like this, you realize that probably an out and out striker would really have helped them. And that's where they are clearly lacking. They had a lot of good chances. They should have finished this game. And if they are going to be champions of the Premier League, this is the game you don't win, you don't draw. You have to get all three
True.
points here.
I
So
thought
that's a
defensively also it wasn't very good from
exactly.
them.
Yeah, the two
Saliba does not
goals.
seem to have had the impact that he had last year.
True.
He's there, and Jesus is not playing. There seems to be some major dispute between Gabriel Jesus and Arteta. So, so am I saying Gabriel Jesus or
Yeah,
Jesus, the
yeah.
centre back? Gabriel, not Jesus.
Gabriel.
But yeah, but Gabriel and Arteta, he's not playing. He's picking pretty much every single other defender over him. There seems to be some sort of fallout at that point. Their defense for me is not as good as last year, and that's shown. Despite bringing Rice into central midfield, they don't seem to be getting grip on things.
Arteta
Slightly worrying.
again. I have some reservations on his man management skills.
Mm.
He has, blocked out players before. He has pushed them away. Okay, he did a good job with Xhaka, but Xhaka was always a good character to have in the club. He's out right now, and yeah, I'm not really sure of him as a manager at the elite level. He might win
Mm.
them a championship. I do not know. Then probably he can convince me. But so far, more needs to be shown and proven by Michael Arteta because he has been backed by the club. There has been money spent. He has got the players he wanted. They pushed out the players he didn't want. He has been given good support. All right. Moving
Mm.
on to another manager who has been given all the support. He needs Eric Ten Hag. Manchester United versus Nottingham Forest. First two goals within 3 minutes and a few seconds. What did you watch? What do you think about the game?
Yeah, that first goal was horrible. How was Rashford the last defender on the pitch? I have no idea why. That corner for Manchester United. He should be in the box trying to get a goal. What's he doing
They
being the last
they have been
defender?
doing this. In fact, the previous game also, which I saw, I noticed that they have been keeping their not very tall players and the strikers out back, and putting in the big defenders up front.
It,
However,
it
Rashford made a mistake because he is not
yeah,
a
so he's
he
not a defender, so he didn't go for that tackle first time.
this
He went for a
but he
50-50. He stayed
yeah,
off.
yeah, so Rashford could have easily, I'm sure he could have beaten him in a foot race. The only reason is he went for that half tackle that gave the striker ground to go
Yeah,
in, and
Avoni ended up
Avoni has been scoring goals. I think he broke the record for
yeah, for
consecutive goals
consecutive
in a season.
goals.
Yeah, so the only reason I'm quite sure Rashford would have beaten him if he didn't go, like, defensively he made a mistake there. The
But
second
he
goal.
shouldn't be in the first place, which is my problem with Ten Hag. Clearly, you can have somebody else in that position.
Who do you want at the back?
Usually, the people who are in
So
that position are your wing backs, or your right wingers, or somebody who's not your
you mean Van
most
Bissaka or
potent
Dalot?
goal scoring. Yeah, Van Bissaka, Dalot would
I think
usually be
Luke
the
Shaw
people there.
was there, but after he got injured, I'm not sure where Dalot was during that game, during that play. Actually, that was a good point. The second goal from the corner, and after that, however, that was the difference. Bruno Fernandes tried to bring people in together. I really like him as a captain, and uh, they played good football. Manchester United definitely played good football. They came back into the game and they finally eventually won it with some really good goals.
Do you have any
Uh,
concerns with the performance, Manish?
I'm happier than I was the last week. So, like the last week, I said they weren't even trying. It looked like they had given up. At least here, they came back and they came back big. This will do really well for their confidence. However, I'm not really sure. I'm more worried about what they're doing in the transfer market. So maybe after this game, they think they don't need a central midfielder, which they definitely do. Amrabat seems on and off. There's news coming in that the player is interested. There is some news that Manchester United is interested, but I think they're still looking out for someone better. There is news coming from various sources about different players. They're trying to get Cucurella, I think, on loan for a fee
Yeah.
from Chelsea. Cucurella flopped horribly
Why
at
would
Chelsea.
Chelsea do that though? Like, I understand Manchester United wanting some sort of a backup until Shaw comes back, but why would Chelsea help out a fellow competitor?
I'm not really sure. Maybe they want to get him off their books. Maybe they're asking for a decent fee. They're asking for, I think, 5 million signing on fee or something of that sort for the
But
loan as
it's
well.
just a loan fee, it's nothing though.
Yeah, but
Unless
maybe
it
his
comes with an
salary is quite a
obligation
bit.
to buy, perhaps that means that Chelsea
I
can
don't
get
know.
rid of him next year.
Maybe, or salary might be, probably they want him off their books. Some reason must be there. Chelsea has sold players this season to a lot of clubs.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
have. Clearly, they have. But
yeah,
at that left back position, they had too many players. They sold Louis Hall to us. Great. They're now selling Cucurella, which means they probably have only Chilwell in that left back. They've actually ended up going from a position of strength to position of weakness. They have Maston, who, okay, fine, but again, it's difficult to say whether that lack of competition will hurt them now.
talking about Chelsea, fantastic game.
Yeah, fantastic game. Sterling again. We did speak about Sterling last week and said that
He
he
has
actually
been looking
seems to be back to his
phenomenal
best.
this season. Phenomenal, I must
Yeah,
say.
seems to have
He,
found that extra gear and back to what Sterling of his peak was.
Yeah,
Going
and
past
and
pace, chopping inside, shooting. It's a nightmare to live with. Total.
exactly, and he's doing well there. So Chelsea really showed up in the last game. Obviously, it was only against Luton, but as I said, I think Chelsea will have growing pains. They will have a topsy-turvy season. We have to see where they'll end up. Pochettino obviously mentions that they're trying to win it all. I mean, basically they're not thinking of winning in the future. They want to win now. And
Hmm.
yeah, they will win more games than they lose. They will do better than last season. How much better we have to see. What about Man
Yeah.
City?
They also seem to have now found somewhere for Lukaku to go.
Yeah,
Surprisingly.
finally. That's
Finally.
what this has been. People are not realizing it, but this has been a fantastic transfer window for Chelsea. They
Yeah,
might
true.
have
They
overpaid for a
managed to
few
sell a
players.
lot more than what we expected.
Exactly, they managed to sell Havertz to Arsenal, and then Arsenal realized. Arsenal always knew. They managed to sell Mason Mount to us. They managed to make more on their players than they were worth, although they bought players for more than they were worth. If you come to
Hmm.
look at it that way, and but whoever they went out to buy, they got them. There was
Yeah.
no player. I mean, everybody seemed interested in moving to Chelsea, which was a plus point for them, player-wise. As in, the players were interested in moving to Chelsea. They may have overpaid. They may have tried to bargain and lost out a bit more money and overpaid for players like Caicedo. But I think Chelsea already looking like they're looking like a good team. Moving on to Man City, the champions last year, they won 2-1. What do you think of their performance?
No, I think it was not an easy victory for them, which is surprising. They're winning games. They're clearly 3 out of 3, but I don't think they're back their best. And Man City usually are slow starters in the league. Historically, that's always been the case. Against Sheffield, did you see that back heel by Walker?
Honestly,
He,
what was he doing?
what he was
He
doing.
knew the guy was right behind him, and yeah, that
And I think the biggest problem was he ended up staying outside the pitch, which ended up playing McBurney onside because the shot came in and McBurney was offside, obstructing the goalkeeper for that goal. That goal could have been ruled out if Walker had just not
yeah.
stayed there,
I
being in
noticed
no man's
memes
land.
where people were mentioning that maybe Walker was actually celebrating after the goal because he did so much for
Yeah,
them.
Sheffield,
But
his boyhood club. No?
yeah, the missed penalty. What about that?
Oh yeah, Haaland's first missed penalty.
Yeah,
Yeah, it for the longest time in that game, it looked like Haaland was not going to score, and it was going to be a very difficult day in the office. But he finally got his goal somehow. It was a great cross by Grealish. I think they are now moving towards having a lot of focus on Grealish than
I
anybody else.
mentioned this. Yes,
Yeah,
they.
they need Grealish to create for them. He's being their creative fulcrum now, especially now that Kevin De Bruyne is not there.
See, they sold Mahrez, who would just create things out of, when the game was just moving away from them, he would just do a step over, beat a player, and given that cross or given that fantastic pass. Now the other player that they have who can do that is Jack Grealish, and Guardiola is using him well. He realizes he can do that, and that's what Grealish did in this game. He beat the player, just gave him the quick, good pass, and it was an easy finish for Haaland. What about
Hmm.
Rodri's goal?
Well,
When he shot
he's
that ball,
so good.
it felt so satisfying. Although Rodri did, I think
Pure,
he did
pure
do a
strike.
bad pass before that. He gave a chance once, I think, a little weaker pass, and a couple of crosses before in that game. I was looking like this. Rodri wasn't playing at to the level he was. His crosses were going haywire, but that shot just stayed true. I'm sure it felt good
Yeah,
because he just
on
smashed
the
it.
weak foot
Smashed it.
top corner. What a hit! But Rodri always has this in his bag. Like his shooting is so pure and cultured that it always finds the top corner for some reason. His shooting is quite underrated, in my opinion. He's actually a very good technician of the ball when he gets to shoot, and that's reflected. I don't think Foden meant to do that pass to Rodri, but it ended up landing in his path nicely. Shot. I think overall it was good. I think Walker also had a chance to make up for that nonsensical mistake. So he put in that cross to Foden, which ended up resulting in the goal. So overall, decent day at the office, but I think they need to improve.
True. So that's it, I think, for today. Thank you for watching
Yep.
the Global Footballer podcast. That's it, Deepak.
Yep.
That's
Thank you, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe. See
yeah,
you
do
next
all
time.
that. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.